I would like to say a few words about Thomas Merton. I know many of you, I'm sure, are very familiar with Thomas Merton. I first came upon his name when I was in the seminary with Father Dennis. We entered the seminary in 1958. And during our seminary days, part of our discipline was we were not allowed to talk during meals. Now, usually people like to talk during meals as part of celebrating a meal. We were not allowed to talk during meals. We had somebody reading some spiritual reading during the meals. And I remember very well, one of the books that was read during our meals was a Thomas Merton early book called Seeds of Contemplation. Now, I didn't take any notice of it. I didn't understand it. But later on, I became very attached to the life and the writings of Thomas Merton. And if you want to take on a significant journey of Lent and you want to do some reading, read The Seven-Storey Mountain, which is biography, the autobiography of Thomas Merton, up to the time he entered the Trappists at Gethsemane in Kentucky. Absolutely thrilling, fascinating book, but a long read, so be patient if you decide to go for that. I became so attached to this fellow and his writings. I went to Kentucky. I went to Gethsemane, to the Trappist monastery, to do some prayer, to some retreat, and to visit his grave. Father Louis, he was called Father Louis. And he's buried there in a very remote, kind of unadorned graveside. However, his legacy lives on. If you prefer to read something that's a little lighter, you might read Conjectures of an Interested Bystander. It's a whole collection of his reflections. When I was in Kentucky, I went to Louisville. That's the closest, largest city to Gethsemane, to the monastery. And there at 4th and Walnut Streets, there is a plaque, a large plaque, dedicated to Merton, to an epiphany. He speaks about his epiphany, which he had in March 18th, 1958. It's an amazing thing because it's a huge sign in the public out there at the corner of 4th and Walnut. And it must be the only time that a sign was ever erected in a public place dedicated to a spiritual apparition and epiphany. And there it is. And in this epiphany of Merton, he was shopping, doing some shopping for the monastery. And he stopped, and he had what he became his epiphany. And in many ways, it changed his whole life. So let me tell you what this epiphany involves in Thomas Merton's life. He died rather tragically. 10 years later, he died in Bangkok. A tragic accident. I think he was only like 53, 54 years old when he died, but he left a huge impact during his short life among us. So listen to this from Conjectures of a Guilty Bystander. I don't know if I said that right the first time. It's called Conjectures of a Guilty Bystander. And in Louisville, at the corner of 4th and Walnut, in the center of the shopping district, I was suddenly overwhelmed with the realization that I loved all those people, that they were mine and I was theirs. And we could not be alien to one another, even though we were total strangers. It was like walking in a dream of separateness, of spurious isolation in a special world, the world of renunciation and supposed holiness. Now he's speaking as a monk here. The whole illusion of a separate holy existence is a dream. He's talking about being a Trappist monk. Not that I question the reality of my vocation or my monastic life, but the conception that separation from the world that we have in the monastery too easily presents itself as a complete illusion. The illusion that by making vows and becoming different, pseudo-angels, spiritual men, men of interior life. Certainly these traditional values are very real, but the reality is not of an order outside everyday existence. Nor does it entitle one to despise the secular, though out of the world, we are in the same world as everybody else. We belong to God. Yet so does everybody else belong to God. We just happen to be conscious of it and to make a profession out of this consciousness. But does this entitle us to consider ourselves different or even better? The whole idea is preposterous. The sense of liberation from an illusory difference was such a relief and such a joy for me, I almost laughed out loud. And I suppose my happiness could have taken form in the words, thank God that I am like other men. I'm only a man among others. It is a glorious destiny to be a member of the human race. Though it is a race dedicated to absurdities and one which makes terrible mistakes, yet with all of that, God himself glorified the human race by becoming a member of the human race. To think that such a commonplace realization should suddenly seem like news, good news, that one holds as if a winning ticket in a cosmic sweepstakes. I have the immense joy of being man, a member of the race in which God himself became incarnate. And if only everybody could realize this, it cannot be explained. There is no way telling people they are walking around like shining stars in the sun. Now, this is 1958 he wrote this. Now, this is before the Second Vatican Council, before we began to appreciate God's presence in all people, in all religions. It's a Lenten thought that if we could stop and just look at God's presence in everybody else, people who differ with us. God knows in our country we are so miserably divided, and even in our church, we are divided by the arrogance of certainty. And yet if we could stop and reflect as Merton did, and just look at other people and see God's presence in other people, see God's beauty and goodness in other people, believe in a new way that when God became human, he became like other people, albeit without sin. But he took on humanity. He took on all the struggles that we have to deal with. The rejection, the struggle to belong, the struggle of somebody who is different and yearning to belong, the struggle to be accepted where he was rejected in his hometown, the struggle to find in a human way a meaningful and fulfilling reality of life, relationships. Relationships are very important in the life of Christ. Think about that, how this might be a Lenten thought, to look in the face of the other person and see the face of God. It appears rather beautifully in Les Miserables, where, you know, Jean Valjean goes through the great conversion. And after he's gone through the great conversion, which happens, by the way, because of a kindness visited upon him, he will sing that magnificent aria, where he sees the face of God. To look in the face of another person is to see the face of God. Would that be possible? That we could actually do that as a Lenten exercise following Jesus Christ? Amen.